I still remember the way the sky looked the summer she disappeared. It wasn't extraordinary to anyone else, just a quiet, endless blue stretched over a sleepy town. But to me, it always felt like something was watching or waiting. Her name was Leela. We were children who believed the world was small enough to hold in our hands. We spent afternoons lying in tall grass behind her house, tracing constellations that didn't exist yet, naming stars like they belonged to us. She used to say the sky wasn't empty, that it was full, just too far away for most people to notice. I used to laugh, but Leela never laughed at that. There was always something slightly off about her. Not in a way that frightened me. No, never that. But a way that made everything else feel dimmer by comparison. She noticed things no one else did. She would pause mid-sentence, tilt her head like she was listening to something beyond sound, and whisper, "Do you hear it?" I never did. But I always said yes. Because when she looked at me like that, like I was the only thing anchoring her to this world, I wanted to be enough. The night she vanished, the sky cracked open. No thunder, no warning, just a low hum that settled into my bones like the earth itself had started breathing. I ran to her house, barefoot, heart pounding, but the place was empty. No signs of struggle, no goodbye, just her bedroom window wide open, curtains drifting like ghosts. On her desk, she'd left something behind. A drawing. It was crude, like all our childhood sketches, but this one was different. It showed a figure standing beneath a sky filled with impossible shapes. Not stars, not planets. Watching, and beside that figure she'd drawn me. Only I was fading. Years passed. People moved on. They always do. They said she ran away. Or worse, that something terrible had happened and we'd never know what. Her name became a quiet discomfort, something avoided in conversation. But I never stopped looking at the sky, not once, because some part of me knew in that irrational, aching way that she hadn't left. She had been taken, or maybe called home. I saw her again the night the world began to end. It started with silence. Every city, every forest, every ocean held in a suspended breath. Then came the lights, not from above, but from everywhere at once, as if reality itself had begun to fracture. And in the center of it all, a structure. No a throne, it descended without movement, unfolding like something alive. Geometry that didn't belong to this universe twisted into impossible forms, shimmering with colors my mind struggled to name. And sitting upon it, her. At first, I told myself it wasn't her. It couldn't be. The figure was too tall, too luminous, her body woven from something between flesh and starlight. Her eyes, God, her eyes held entire galaxies, spinning slowly in endless, silent collapse. She wore no crown, but everything about her commanded one. An army stood behind her, beings of shifting shapes, their forms unstable, like they hadn't fully decided what it meant to exist. And yet they bowed to her, not out of fear, but devotion. And when she spoke, the world bent to listen, not in words, but in meaning. A presence pressed against my mind, vast and incomprehensible, like standing too close to the edge of infinity. We have returned. Returned. The word echoed inside me, tearing something open. Because suddenly I knew she hadn't been taken. She had been chosen. I don't remember how I got there. One moment I was among the terrified crowds, staring up at the impossible. And the next, I was standing at the base of her throne, alone. The air felt heavy, like it was resisting me or testing me. And then her gaze found mine. Everything stopped. The noise, the fear, the collapsing sky. It all dissolved into nothing. It was just us, like it had always been. For a moment, just a single fragile moment, I saw her, not the queen, not the entity that ruled over something ancient and unknowable, but Leela. The girl in the grass, the one who asked me if I could hear the sky. Her expression flickered. Something soft, something human. Recognition, my name formed in my mind. Not spoken, but felt, like a memory brushing against my soul. And I broke, Lila. My voice trembled, small against the vastness of her existence. It's me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, conflicted. She descended, not by walking, but by unraveling, her form folding through space until she stood before me. Up close, she was even less human than I'd feared. And yet, painfully, Still her. I remember you. The words weren't sound. They were emotion, memory, regret. They cut deeper than any voice ever could. You left. I whispered. You didn't even say goodbye. A flicker of something passed through her. Something like grief, distorted by a mind that had outgrown it. I did not understand goodbye, she replied. Not then. I laughed. It came out broken. Not now. She hesitated. For a being that commanded worlds, she hesitated. I understand it too well. I wanted to reach for her. God, I wanted to. But something in me knew if I touched her, I wouldn't find warmth. I wouldn't find the girl I love. I would find the void between stars. What are you? I asked, though I already knew the answer would hurt. I am what they made me, she said. What I was always meant to become. Not here, I said, not with me. A pause, softer. Not with you, no. Behind her, the sky began to change. Not darkening, opening. Something vast was coming through, something her presence alone had been preparing for. This wasn't an invasion. It was a homecoming, and she was its queen. I can't stay, she said. The words shattered whatever hope I had left. You just got back. I never came back, she corrected gently. I only returned to finish what was started. My chest tightened me. I asked, what am I to you now? For the first time, the galaxies in her eyes stilled. And in that stillness, I saw it. Love, not gone, just transformed into something too large, too distant to hold. You, she said, are the only thing I remember that feels like losing. That was the moment I understood. Not that she didn't love me, but that she couldn't be what love required anymore. She remembered the boy in the grass, but she had become something that belonged to the sky. The light around her intensified. The world trembled as whatever waited beyond began to cross over. This is goodbye, she said, and this she understood it. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to nod. Then don't forget me, I said. A faint, almost human smile touched her expression. I couldn't, she whispered, even if I unmade the stars. I still remember the way the evenings used to settle over our town, slow, golden, and just a little too quiet, as if the world was holding its breath for something it couldn't name. We were children then, small enough to believe that time would wait for us, that nothing real could ever be lost. Her name was Leela, and somehow, even before I understood what it meant to care about someone, I knew she was different in a way I couldn't explain. Not strange in the way people whisper about, but something softer, deeper, like she didn't quite belong to the same gravity as the rest of us. We met behind her house, where the grass grew taller than it should have, where the wind made everything feel alive, and where the sky seemed closer than anywhere else in the world. That was our place, the place where we built our small, fragile universe out of laughter and silence and secrets no one else was allowed to hear. Lily used to lie on her back and stare upward for hours, her fingers tracing invisible patterns as if she were connecting stars that hadn't been born yet. And sometimes she would smile, something I couldn't see, something far beyond the blue. It's not empty. She told me once, her voice so certain it made my chest tighten. Everyone thinks the sky is empty, but it isn't. It's full. You just have to know how to listen. I laugh because that's what children do when faced with something they don't understand. But even then, part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me needed to. There were moments when she would go quiet in the middle of our games, her head tilting slightly, her expression distant, like she was hearing a voice carried on a frequency the rest of us couldn't reach. And when I asked her what was wrong, she would just shake her head and say, nothing you'd hear yet. She always said yet, like it was a promise waiting for me somewhere in the future. We spent entire summers like that, chasing fireflies that seemed to follow her more than me, drawing strange shapes in the dirt that she insisted were maps, even though they led nowhere I recognized. She once drew a spiral so intricate it made my eyes hurt to look at it, then placed a small dot at the center and told me that was where everything began and ended at the same time. I told her that didn't make sense, and she just smiled, not mocking, not distant, just patient, like she was waiting for me to catch up to something I didn't even realize I was missing. Sometimes I wondered if she had always been there or if she had simply appeared one day when I wasn't paying attention, as natural and quiet as dusk slipping into night. My parents said she was just the girl who lived down the road, but that never felt like enough of an explanation. Not for the way the air seemed to change around her, not for the way she could make silence feel full instead of empty. She had a habit of asking questions that didn't belong to children. Questions about where we were before we were born or whether memories could exist without bodies to hold them. And I never had answers, but she never seemed disappointed. She would just nod like she expected that too. One day, she said once, her eyes reflecting a sky that hadn't yet turned to stars, "You'll remember things you don't know yet." I didn't understand that either, but I remember the way it made me feel. Like there was something important just out of reach, something vast and quiet and waiting. The day she disappeared felt wrong from the moment I woke up, like the world had shifted slightly off its axis without telling anyone. The air was too still, the sky too clear, the silence too complete. I ran to our place behind her house, already knowing something was missing before I could see it, before I could feel it settle into my bones like a truth I didn't want. She wasn't there. No footprints in the grass, no half-finished drawings in the dirt, no voice calling my name from somewhere just out of sight. Just emptiness, real emptiness, the kind she had always insisted didn't exist. I remember standing there for a long time, staring up at the sky the way she used to, trying to see what she saw, trying to hear what she heard, but there was nothing. Only the hollow, echoing absence of someone who had once made everything feel full. That was the first time I understood losing someone doesn't happen all at once. It begins quietly, in the spaces they leave behind, in the questions that no longer have anyone to answer them, in the silence that suddenly feels heavier than it ever did before. And even then, even as the days turned into years and her name faded from everyone else's memory, I couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't truly gone anywhere at all, that whatever part of her had never quite belonged to this world had simply returned to where it was always meant to be, leaving the rest of us behind to wonder if we had ever really known her in the first place. The older I grew, the more I realized that Leela had never really fit inside the shape of the world the rest of us occupied, as if she had been placed here gently but incorrectly, like a piece from another puzzle that almost belonged if you didn't look too closely. Back then, I didn't have the language for it. I only knew that being around her felt like standing on the edge of something vast and invisible, something that hummed just beneath the surface of ordinary life. She moved differently, not in any obvious way, but with a kind of quiet awareness that made everything else seem slow and clumsy by comparison, like she was always half a second ahead of time itself. Sometimes she would stop mid-step, her eyes drifting past me, past the trees, past everything, focusing on a distance I couldn't measure, and her breathing would change, shallow and deliberate, as if she were trying to match some rhythm only she could hear. I would call her name, wave my hand in front of her face, even laugh nervously to break whatever spell had taken hold of her. And after a moment, she would return, blinking as though she had traveled somewhere far away and only just remembered how to come back. "Did you hear that?" she would ask, her voice hushed but filled with something close to wonder, and I would always shake my head, though part of me wished, desperately, that I could say yes. She never seemed disappointed by my answer, only thoughtful, as if my inability to hear it confirmed something she already suspected. There were nights when we would lie in the grass, side by side, the world dimming around us, and while I counted the stars I recognized, she would point to spaces where there was nothing and describe shapes, movements, entire constellations that didn't exist, at least not anyone else. She spoke of them like old friends, like stories she was remembering rather than inventing. Her voice soft and steady, filled with a certainty that made it impossible to dismiss her completely. "They don't stay still," she once told me, tracing slow arcs in the air above us. "That's why people think they aren't there. They only look where things don't move." I didn't understand what that meant, but I remember the way her fingers trembled slightly, as if she were resisting the urge to reach out and touch something just beyond her grasp. There was a kind of loneliness in her, though it didn't look like the loneliness I knew. It wasn't heavy or sad, not exactly, but vast, like an empty sky stretching in all directions. Beautiful and endless and impossible to fill. She rarely spoke about her family, and when she did, it felt rehearsed, like she was repeating facts she had learned rather than memories she had lived. And there were times I wondered if she even noticed the difference. Once, I asked her where she had been before she moved here, and she paused for so long I thought she hadn't heard me, her gaze drifting upward, as it so often did, her expression tightening ever so slightly. Somewhere far, she said finally, but the way she said it made distance feel like something deeper than miles, something measured in ways I couldn't begin to comprehend. Do you miss it? I asked, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face, something sharp and almost painful, like a memory too large to hold. I don't know if I'm supposed to. She replied, and that answer stayed with me longer than it should have, settling into my thoughts like a question without an end. There were other things, smaller things, details that seemed insignificant until you tried to add them together. The way animals reacted to her, not with fear, but with a strange, reverent stillness, as if they recognized something sacred or unknowable. The way she never seemed surprised by anything, as though the world was simply unfolding according to a pattern she had already seen. The way she spoke about time not as something that passed, but as something that circled back on itself, repeating, overlapping, existing all at once. "We've done this before," she said once, smiling faintly as we sat beneath a fading sunset. "Not exactly like this, but close enough." I laughed because it sounded like a joke, but she didn't laugh with me. She just looked at me in that quiet, searching way of hers, as if she were trying to decide whether I was ready to understand something I hadn't yet learned how to see. And despite everything, despite the strangeness, the unease, the sense that she was always standing with one foot in a place I couldn't follow, I never felt afraid of her. If anything, I felt the opposite, drawn toward her like gravity had shifted, like being near her made the world feel larger, more alive, more meaningful in ways I couldn't explain. She was a mystery I didn't want solved, a question I didn't want answered, because some part of me knew that whatever truth lay behind her strange habits and distant gaze would change everything, not just about her, but about the world itself and about me. And maybe that was the most unsettling thing of all. Not that she was different, but that deep down, in a place I didn't dare explore too closely, I suspected she had always been something more than human, and that one day, whether I was ready or not, that truth would reveal itself in a way I could never undo. The day Lila disappeared did not arrive like a storm or a tragedy. It slipped into existence quietly, almost gently, the way a shadow lengthens without anyone noticing until it has already swallowed the light. I remember waking with a strange heaviness pressing against my chest, as if something inside me already knew what the rest of the world had yet to discover. The air felt different that morning. Too still, too clean, like everything unnecessary had been stripped away, leaving behind a silence that didn't belong. Even the birds seemed hesitant, their song scattered and uncertain, as though they were listening for something they could no longer hear. I told myself it was nothing, just one of those strange moods that come and go without reason. But the feeling followed me, clinging to my thoughts, tightening with every step I took toward the place where we always met. The grass behind her house swayed gently in the breeze, exactly as it always had, golden and alive. But there was no sign of her, no movement, no laughter, no quiet figure lying on her back and staring into the sky as if it might answer her unspoken questions. At first, I wasn't afraid. Leela had a way of appearing when you least expected it, stepping out from behind a tree or calling my name from somewhere just out of sight, as if she had been there all along, simply waiting for the right moment to be seen. I called out to her then, my voice carrying across the field, light and hopeful, certain that she would answer, certain that this was just another one of her strange, playful silences. But the only response was the wind brushing past me in a way that felt almost apologetic. I waited longer than I should have, pacing in small circles, scanning the horizon, convincing myself that she was late, that she would come running any second with that quiet smile of hers, offering no explanation, because she didn't believe one was needed. But she didn't come. And slowly, the certainty I had been holding on to began to fracture, replaced by something colder, something heavier, something that settled deep in my bones and refused to be ignored. I ran to her house then, my heartbeat loud in my ears, each step faster than the last, as if I could outrun the growing truth chasing after me. The front door was closed, the windows dark, the entire place wrapped in a stillness that felt unnatural, like a photograph of a home rather than a home itself. I knocked once, then again, harder this time, calling her name with a desperation I didn't try to hide, but no one answered. The silence pressed in around me, thick and suffocating, until I could barely hear my own voice. I moved to the side of the house, to her window, the one she used to leave open so she could hear the night more clearly, and found it exactly as I feared, wide open, the curtains drifting lazily in the empty air, as if they were breathing in her absence. My chest tightened painfully as I climbed inside, the familiarity of her room hitting me all at once. Every detail exactly as it had always been, and yet completely wrong without her there to fill it. Her books were still stacked neatly by her bed, her shoes placed carefully near the door, her drawings scattered across the desk in the same chaotic order she insisted made perfect sense. It was as if she had stepped out for a moment and simply never returned. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of anything violent or sudden, just a quiet, deliberate absence that felt more unsettling than any chaos could have been. I called her name again, softer this time, as if raising my voice might shatter whatever fragile trace of her still lingered in the room. But the silence answered me once more, unbroken and absolute. And then I saw it, single sheet of paper resting at the center of her desk, placed there with an intention that made my hands tremble before I even reached for it. The drawing was unmistakably hers, the same careful lines, the same strange patterns that always seemed to mean more than they revealed. But this one was different, darker somehow, filled with shapes that twisted and overlapped in ways that made my eyes ache if I looked too long. At the center stood a figure beneath a sky that wasn't a sky at all, surrounded by forms that felt alive in a way I couldn't explain, watching, waiting, reaching. And beside that figure, faint, barely visible, like something being erased, I recognized myself. My breath caught in my throat as the meaning settled over me, slow and suffocating. This wasn't just a drawing. It was a goodbye I had never heard, a message left behind in a language I didn't understand until it was too late. I don't remember leaving the house, don't remember how I made it back to the field, or how long I stood there staring up at the endless blue, searching for something, anything, that might explain what had happened. All I remember is the feeling, the hollow, echoing absence that spread through me, replacing everything else, until even the memories we had built